Okay.
So among those of y'all who are here today, is anybody here because they really do not want to go to law school? Maybe? Yeah? Is there anybody here who's like, yeah, I'm going to law school, but I just want to see like what my options are? Yeah? Okay. So you're definitely looking pre-law?
Yeah.
That's cool.
But I want to see the other options too.
Sure. I think that's a good idea. And not to put you on the spot either, but have you done any things like internships with law firms or seen what lawyers do in their daily life at all?
Not at an actual law firm, but at like a like my state, the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters, which is kind of in that realm. So
Yeah.
I didn't like it, obviously.
Well, and to be fair too, I mean, lawyers work in many different capacities. It's, that we see so much on television, especially with TV dramas involving legal work, people in the courtroom arguing, in front of a judge, on defense and prosecution. And that's really only one aspect of a thing that people do with law. And in fact, it's possible to work in the legal field without a law degree. You can't practice law in the traditional sense, but there's a lot of work that has to be done to support the legal field that can be done without a JD. So I was just curious. There was a time in my life when I was interested in law school a little bit. In the end, personally, I'm actually glad that I didn't go to law school because of the way my career path has led me to this. But at the same time, I know some people. In fact, a friend of mine, his dad just retired. He loved being a lawyer. Not everybody does, but he loved it. And so, that's one option certainly, but it's not the path that I took. My name is Will Donnelly. My office is in Candler Hall, 107. I hear some people refer to that as the IA building. Is that true? I've never heard that. And suddenly I was reading this thing and they're like, oh, everybody calls it the IA building. And I was like, I don't, but I've never heard anybody say that. Anyway, I'm there among probably most, if not all, of your academic advisors. But I am the internship and career services coordinator, which means that if you're interested in obtaining an internship, really in pretty much any field, I'm the person who can help you do that. And in fact, we have some funding at SPIA that we can use for organizations. If they're not able to afford to hire you for an internship, we can give them the money so that they can pay you and give you a paid internship. Not every school at UGA is able to do that. But the Georgia legislature has been very kind to us. As I said, I was an international affairs major in undergrad. I have a bachelor's degree in international affairs from the College of William and Mary in Virginia. I went after that, did not go to law school. I worked for about a year and a half for the Federal Trade Commission in Washington, doing research and analysis for the federal government, specifically for economics. I worked in a branch called the Bureau of Competition. We were an antitrust arm of the FTC. And that too, in many ways, was legal work because we were having to research laws, we were having to look through depositions, look through evidence and so forth before our team of attorneys could take the evidence that we found to trial. I did that for about a year and a half. After that, I spent about 4 years as an insurance underwriter. I worked for Nationwide Insurance in South Florida. I'm from Florida originally. That's something else you can do, clearly, because at that time I didn't have advanced degrees. And that was fun. It was interesting. I enjoyed it. I made a lot of friends there. As an underwriter, what you do basically is like you go out to, if they wanted to, say, insure, if Baldwin Hall wanted to get an insurance policy on it, I would be the person who would come to the building, look around, make sure there's fire sprinklers. I see a couple up there. That's good. There's good exits are marked, right? We're not likely to have a huge loss here. This is not a building that's made out of flimsy wood that might burn down or blow apart in a tornado or something like that, right? And so we'd say, yeah, well, here's what we'll charge you for insurance for this. So I worked in finance basically for about 4 years in the risk management wing of all that. And then really bad hurricane season in Florida threatened the insurance industry in many ways. It's still under threat because of increasing frequency of hurricanes. And they were nationwide started talking about layoffs. And I was like, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to have my job, coming up. And maybe if by my leaving, I can save someone else's job in the process. And something I was very interested in, I've always been very interested in this, is creative writing. So I was like, well, now's the time. I went to the University of Iowa to get a master's of fine arts in fiction writing. That took 2 years. While I was there, I learned that I really enjoyed teaching. And so I went to the University of Houston. I completed a PhD in 5 years. And suddenly, I had the credentials to become an English professor. Despite none of those degrees being English degrees. So it turned out it didn't really matter. And then I taught fiction writing, creative writing, English literature for about 10 years at Berry College over in Rome, Georgia. And I decided eventually, I don't know, the faculty lifestyle wasn't so much for me. There are various reasons for that. For one thing, and I know you don't see your professors doing all of this, but there's a lot of work that you take home with you every day. I was grading papers all weekend. I love to read just as much as I love to write, but I was only able really to read the stuff that I assigned my students because I had to keep up with whatever they were doing. And so I took this job because I thought, this is a job that kind of stays at the office, but I still get to work with students, and I love working with students. And yet I don't have to give you a grade, which is also nice, because there's some pressure in that too. So that's one example. I think I'm an example of somebody who I feel I've really thrived without a law degree, and yet effectively a SPIA degree. So to get into a little more of the nuts and bolts of this, a lot of us, I think, when we think of the term liberal arts college, we think of a school more like Berry, maybe more like Swarthmore, Smith College, Dartmouth, right? These are like smaller institutions, a couple thousand students. And you may be familiar with the fact that, yes, you're getting a liberal arts degree, you are, but that all of these institutions essentially operate on the same model, which is the liberal arts model. That's why you're not only taking classes in SPIA. What is the most challenging class you've taken so far that's not in SPIA? I'm not going to tell them. Yeah?
I'm going to take astronomy.
Yeah, I can see that. It involves more math, I think, than we think it's going to.
Yeah.
I had that experience too. Anybody else?
Latin. I have no Latin background, and I had to take 3 semesters of it. So it's
Ooh.
hard.
Yeah, that's tough. Probably good though, in that you get a good foundation for Romance languages. And you probably understand some things about English grammar that you might not have otherwise. So
That's true.
that's cool. Yeah. But there's a method to this madness. I mean, and it's that basically, this isn't job training at UGA. They're not going to say, here's how you go out and do this job. Which makes sense when you consider that there is no job title called international affairs, or public affairs, or political science. There are fields that work with those things, definitely. And so what you're doing by majoring in this field really is you're kind of focusing in on certain things that may interest you, might be able to lead you down a career path that you really would like to be a part of. But it's also pretty flexible. And the same is true of actually most college degrees. Some students don't realize this, but in truth, if you wanted to go to law school, you don't have to get a degree in political science or international relations. In fact, it doesn't matter what you get a degree in. Law school does not care. What they care about more than anything else, in addition to some application essays and stuff like that, is your GPA and your LSAT scores. And there are many ways to prepare for that. What's your strategy for getting the best GPA you can? I have an answer in mind. Study. that's a good step in the right direction, sure. There's something that might help that be more successful. Are you going to say something?
Take easy classes.
Take easy classes. It's another way you can do it, sure. It's not always possible, but sure. Here's my strategy. Take the classes that interest you the most, because they will be easy and you will study for them. It's always the classes that you dislike. I mean, it was always the classes that I just was like, no, I don't think I can do this. That was me in Calculus 1. It's just like things were flying over my head, and I'd sit there and stare at the textbook, and I was like, I just am not getting this. I made it through somehow, but by focusing on the classes that I really enjoyed and felt a connection to, and said, okay, those are the ones I want to take, my GPA was high automatically. So and I think that's the advice, really, I can't speak for everybody, but that most of the advisors around whom I work would give you as well. What's a transferable skill? Anybody know? Have an idea of what it might be?
Research.
Research is transferable to many different fields, so that's one. But what in terms of a concept of transferable skills, what do you think those kinds of skills do? They transfer, right? Sometimes it can be a little hard to pin down, even if you have kind of a general idea. Go back here just a second. So transferable skills, I think I have another slide on this coming up, but it may be out of order. A transferable skill is something like, if you have research skills, lots of jobs need people to be able to do research. In fact, for those of you in international affairs, especially, but also for those of you in political science, we have a lot of students at UGA who work for or intern for a company called BSI, British Standards Institute. And what BSI does, it's basically a research firm that conducts what they call OSINT. Anybody know what OSINT is? There was actually a presentation on it, I think it was last week, may have been in this room, I'm not sure. OSINT is open source intelligence. What do you think that might mean? Any guesses? Yeah.
Intelligence you can access without having like special certifications.
Exactly. Intelligence you can gather without having to be a spy, right? Or use covert methods to find. And in fact, in this day and age, open source intelligence is everywhere. I heard, I wasn't able to make it to that presentation, but that as kind of a game at the beginning of the presentation, they ask everybody in the room to get your computers or your phones out using only open source intelligence. Locate the whereabouts of Kirby Smart right now. How might you find Kirby Smart in that situation?
See if he's got a press conference.
Sure. Does he have a press conference? Which, and maybe he's at the press conference right now, maybe he's not, but he's probably in that location if there is one today. And you can basically just Google his name, right? And look for the most recent results. That's probably going to give you some clues there too, right? So what BSI does, they need people to be able to research this kind of open source intelligence that they can then apply to do work for companies that are shipping things overseas. Because they need a lot of information in order to do that, really. I mean, if you think about it, if a company like Nike, say they've got a whole bunch of shoes, they're shipping from Indonesia to California, they need to know things like, where are they gonna have to stop to refuel? What are the laws there? Is there any threat to their cargo from piracy, for instance? Should they maybe take another route due to weather? BSI is providing all of that. And we have many international affairs graduates working now for BSI in just that way. So that's a kind of transferable skill. Another good transferable skill, and something you should really definitely include on your resume, be honest about it, but include it on your resume, is a second language or a third language. Because again, you know, that's a skill too that can apply across many different jobs. And so having a lot of transferable skills is great. And that's a lot of what you're developing here with a liberal arts degree. And these entities right here, I can confirm, all of them have hired SPIA grads, most of them without JDs. So you can see we've got some software companies, huge software companies there, a couple of large consulting firms, elementary, middle, and high schools, because it turns out you can teach in many cases, depending on the school district, without an advanced degree of any kind, just with a bachelor's degree, as long as you have a teaching certificate. And those can be obtained oftentimes through the school districts themselves or through UGA. If you're interested, you can contact the Department of Education if you decided you wanted to teach. Journalists, lots of people need to have political science and international affairs knowledge to go into journalism. You've also got to be a good writer if you're going to go into journalism. Those skills are very important. Just curiously, and there's no judgment here, who has used ChatGPT? Yeah. How are you using it? Again, no judgment, there's none of your professors in here. I just want to know, I'm curious.
I'm in a class that's data analytics for international policy, and my professor said like ChatGPT is really good to look up code for different softwares. It's a lot more accurate than just looking at it.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah. Anybody else?
Creating the outline for an essay.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I can see that.
Also, sometimes like grammatical editing can be good.
Sure. ChatGPT's grammar is pretty good, pretty solid. I've heard more recently of people using ChatGPT to write cover letters for applications. You know, when I say using it to write, I don't mean saying literally, you know, give me a cover letter and then just taking whatever's there and sending it out. That's probably a bad idea. People have gotten in trouble for doing stuff like that, not just because it's plagiarism, but because ChatGPT is also often incorrect. You know, it can sound really intelligent even when it's getting things wrong, but it can be used too, in some ways, in journalism. Sometimes that may go a little too far, but in general, if you're using it to outline an essay or an article or something like that, it's probably a good use of it. And I mean, honestly, like, it's with us now. So you might as well figure out good ways to use it, and maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that can come with it. 2 SPIA grads, within the last 20 years at least, have opened breweries locally. A SPIA graduate, David Stein, founded Creature Comforts downtown. Another SPIA grad, Taylor Lamb, founded Oconee Brewing, which is located in Greensboro, Georgia as well. The only reason I bring this up is because becoming an entrepreneur of some kind is also not out of the question at all here. And as David Stein, I was reading in this article, he was saying that he had been a political science major here, and that he was able to use that in some ways because it dealt with things like he needed to pass zoning enforcement laws to open a business like Creature Comforts. He was very active in the community, giving a lot of money to charity, and working with local politics as well in terms of legal status of what he's doing, because alcohol, you know, is typically highly regulated. But another thing that you're gaining skills in too, with either political science or international affairs, is basically public relations. It may not always seem like it, but that's a big part of what you're doing too. In order to pass laws, whether you're a JD or not, you could be a legislator, you've got to know how laws get passed in the first place. So here's my transferable skills. And I promise you, I'm not just going to read a slide. I never like when people do that. I will say the example that I give here is about public relations. We do occasionally work with interns who go to work for different people in office, basically. For instance, there's a state representative, Stacey Evans. We have a couple of interns working at her office right now. We can help you to get internships too on specific campaigns. One thing we cannot do is provide funding for those internships. And the reason for that is just that because our money that we get comes from Georgia taxpayers, we can't use taxpayer money to fund a particular campaign. You see what I'm saying? But once they're in office, you know, and they're there, then they're just working for the state, and then it's okay. And these are just a few of the organizations that SPIA graduates without law degrees have gone to work for. BSI in the middle, I mean, that's been a big one traditionally. And that's an international organization as well. Recently, I was sitting in on a Zoom presentation, and a SPIA grad was zooming in from the White House. Has anybody done the Washington semester, or are you looking into that at all? Maybe? Yeah, that's great. Don De Maria is the director of that program. And one of the nicest things about that program, to me, because I've lived in DC and I can tell you it's really expensive, is that you don't have to pay for housing while you're there, because UGA has a house on Capitol Hill that's been converted basically into a really nice sort of dorm facility. So it's very central. Has anybody done it yet? You've done it? Yeah? How's the house?
Oh, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was, completely reshaped the way I approach kids back on campus here.
Yeah. Was it better than the dorms here?
Well, I never stayed in a dorm here at campus,
Okay.
so,
What was nice about the house? I haven't been yet. So.
The house, yes, you did have like two to three roommates.
Mhm.
You had classrooms on the first floor, so you get back from work at like maybe 4 or 5, Capitol Hill, you might have been a little later.
Yeah.
Maybe eat something, and then you go down to your class on the first floor. It's these kind of long, they're only twice a week,
Mhm.
and then you just walk up the stairs and go to bed or get something else to do.
That's cool.
And you all get together in the sort of common room and watch the Georgia games and everything.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds nice. It looks really nice. I know in about a month I'm going up there to, I'll be touring that among some other things, and I'm really excited about it. But I can tell you too, without those sort of amenities, living in DC is super expensive. Now, of course, you don't have to move to Washington if you're looking to get into political science or international affairs, but living there can be a challenge. And yet, if any of you find yourself in that position and you don't have the Delta house at your disposal, I can help you navigate DC as well, just as someone who did live there for some time. And there are tricks to it. How about, before we keep going, is anybody interested maybe in some kind of grad school, but maybe not law school? Yeah? Do you have an idea of what that might be? I mean, you don't have to commit. I'm just thinking of, stuff rolling around in your mind. Not yet. Well, these are examples of graduate school experiences that recent SPIA grads have had. I was most surprised here by dentistry, but turns out you don't need a specific major in order to go to dental school or medical school or veterinary school. You just have to be able to, pass the appropriate test, the MCAT, or whatever it happens to be. And it would probably help to have some elective experience in some of the sciences. Journalism, like I said, what we talked about before, that's probably, pretty natural. Why might someone with a SPIA degree want to go into the field of artificial intelligence?
If they're looking at kind of international security type things, sure, there's a lot there. Also public policy.
Yeah, absolutely. Public policy and artificial intelligence these days, they go hand in hand a lot, you know? How do we govern this kind of stuff? And that includes the internet itself. How do we govern the internet? I read this, it was just the last couple of days, this news story, I think it was in the New York Times, it was kind of frightening. It was talking about this, it was a young man, he was a YouTuber, I guess. I had never heard his name before, but he was popular on social media, and he discovered that there existed this AI entity that somebody had fed basically his voice patterns to, so that it could speak in his voice, saying things that he had not ever said, which is kind of scary when you think about it. You know, and so it's issues like that I think it probably really start shaping a lot of public policy moving forward as well. Anybody interested in medicine, dentistry, sports management? No? Okay. They're all options. And these, you don't even have to go to grad school, really. I learned actually just last week, I didn't know this, to get in, to qualify for the U.S. Foreign Service, which is a very tough job to get, but it does not require even an undergraduate degree. If you can take the test and pass it and get through that battery of interviews that they have, you can be a Foreign Service officer, whether you have that degree or not. It used to be the case, actually, that to get a law degree, you didn't have to have an undergraduate degree. And long before that, you didn't have to have a law degree to pass the bar. Anybody could just go be a lawyer. But times have changed somewhat, right? Perhaps for the best. Paralegal work is a really common career for people who don't have a law degree but still want to work in the legal field, in which case you're helping with things like research and deposition work, stuff like that. You can get a paralegal certificate from a lot of schools if you're interested in that, but that's just in the legal field. Elected positions generally don't require an advanced degree or maybe even a college degree. I included insurance jobs up here because, of course, I was working there with an international affairs degree. The underwriter working next to me had a degree in zoology. Next to her, there was a guy with a degree in psychology. There was somebody down the way with a degree in English. Why might an insurance company want this kind of broad array of different majors? There's actually a good reason for it. Why might any company want that?
Diversity of thought.
Yes, yeah. Any major company, they've got to be able to adapt and be able to tackle problems that maybe they can't even foresee coming. And part of my work, our work on my team as an underwriter, was to look at, okay, say, again, Baldwin Hall has this insurance policy. We've been insuring them for the past 3 years. We got to look at what has happened at this place. Have there been any major accidents or anything like that? Unlikely here, but at certain types of buildings, someone might have been attacked by a dog. Suddenly, the zoology major comes into play, right? You might have a situation where a person's here in Baldwin Hall, commits some kind of minor crime, but they're not a U.S. citizen. Suddenly, I'm the one who's called on. How do we address this? Most of these companies, and when I was showing companies like Meta, Microsoft, IBM, all of the consulting firms, for instance, they really need a team that has a wide, diverse range of knowledge because they have to be able to adapt and be able to handle whatever's coming at them. If you notice here, most federal jobs, and that includes the intelligence jobs, don't require advanced degrees, but most of them do require a bachelor's degree. That's what you're working on, so that's good. Like I said here, some primary and secondary teaching jobs, sure. Lots of people, if they major in finance, think that the finance world, that could help them, and it can, sure. There's a focus on that. But you don't have to have a degree in finance to go into financial work. Salesforce, and I don't just mean like retail jobs. I've had some retail jobs, but I mean kind of even beyond that. People, selling huge quantities of stuff. There are, for instance, people who manage like the entire wing of book sales for a company like eBay or Amazon, right? They too need people with experience like this. PR is a great one too. That's actually one I would advise anybody interested in English too. With English majors, PR is all about communication. And you're learning a lot of that as well. All right, so that's the last slide that I have. Does anybody have any questions about any of this so far? Or anything else? Life, the universe. I promise I can answer those, but try. Has anyone had an internship yet during the time you were at UGA? Some folks, yeah. What were your internships?
It was at home, but it was the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters.
That's right.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm really glad that you were able to do that, because that's it kind of shows you what that side of some of that legal but also policy work. So that's great. How about you?
Mine was in Washington, D.C., and I worked with Edison Electric Institute, the trade association.
Oh, cool. Okay. What were you doing like day to day with that?
I did a lot of government relations and public affairs work for them.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to go to the Hill, watch hearings, do legislative memos and stuff.
Nice. That's cool. That's a great experience. A lot of exposure to kind of the way things work in Washington. What did you?
Mom was the U.S. House representative.
Nice. Okay. Was it a specific representative?
Yeah, he was Tracy Mann, who's from Kansas.
Okay.
Yeah, so really far out there.
Yeah. Well, what kind of stuff do you do day to day in an office like that?
The day-to-day work was a lot of answering phones, and then when I wasn't answering phones, I used to work on like a research project, and we had the incoming congressional group, all these freshman congressmen, so I was doing research on every single one of them. It was like 50 or so.
Okay.
Then we gave that to the congressman, so he knew like who his colleagues were going to be.
Sure.
And then I would say the most interesting parts of it though were like people. I would meet like every day I was meeting somebody who was definitely something. They were definitely somebody. The president of the World Food, no, the World, I think it's the World Food Program.
Okay.
It's the president and vice president of AMC Theaters. I gave them a tour of the Capitol.
Whoa.
That was really interesting. And I mean, just all kinds of really interesting people that I would have never met or even expected.
That's really cool. Yeah, when I lived in DC too, it's sometimes you just like be in line at Starbucks and in front of you there's a senator or something. Yeah. It's just kind of random. I mean, sometimes it didn't happen all the time.
Somebody in our hall, he was criminal justice working for like the DC Metro Police Department or something. So he wasn't big on politics, and he was at the grocery store with Mitch McConnell and didn't know who he was. Actually came back and they somehow managed to figure it out.
Yeah.
He was like, the guy looked important, and they figured it out, so he bragged on him for a very long time.
Wow. Well, I relate to that because I'm one of those people who like, I'll see famous people and I don't even realize it, but other people have to tell me and then I recognize, and then I'm just really bad about it. So I get that. Well, I don't really have anything else to add here, but if any of you all individually or in a small group, if you want to come by my office, we can set up a meeting if you'd like to and talk about other options that you might be interested in as well. I'm happy to do that. Part of the reason that I'm in this position, I've been told, part of the reason I was hired to do what I'm doing now is because my own career path has been kind of circuitous. I think when I was in college, I had this impression that it's like, oh, I'm getting a degree in international affairs, I'm gonna get some job and just work my way through, and that's all I'm ever gonna do. You know, and if I get a law degree, then I'm just gonna be a lawyer, and that's it. You know, one thing that, and I think this is just a last piece of advice I would bear in mind if you are considering law school, is that some degrees, law and medicine among them, are very expensive. And part of the reason that they can afford to be that expensive is because they're graduating people through those programs who have an opportunity to make a lot of money and pay, say, those loans back if they have loans and so forth. But the only problem is that that can create a situation in which you are kind of trapped in that position. You know, I mean, if you owe, I'm going to use this example because I don't think it's true of anyone in the room, medical school, and you get out of medical school and you're $350,000 in debt. You know, you don't have as many options at that point, other than becoming some kind of a surgeon or something, because you've got to pay that money back, and it's gonna be tough. But you know, if you get a job that pays those kinds of dollars, then you know it's that much easier to do. And so that's part of the reason that I think for anyone who maybe is still considering law school, make sure that you know what you're getting into, what kind of a career you might be committing to before you do that, because law school can be really expensive too. It's only usually 3 years, but it's, you know, it's a lot. So, any other questions? Anything? All right. Well, I will stop the camera back here. If anybody wants to stick around and ask individual questions, I'm happy to help with those. And like I said, we can set up